Now excited to be joined by a very special guest. It is my guy, Brad Crawford. Brad, I want to get into some SEC quarterback rankings with you a little bit. We'll talk a little EA Sports, college football video game at the
Yeah,
end here. But man, we got to talk Dabo. Got to talk Dabo. We're dads. We say cringe stuff, but why is Dabo's cringe so bad? All he has to do in this quote that comes out from ACC PM, all he has to do is just say like, yeah, we hosted some transfers, it didn't work out, and then just be done with it. Just move on. And instead, he says the cringe line after of technically every player's a transfer. We just signed a whole class of guys transferring from high school. Why must Dabo be this way?
it just makes you roll your eyes, man. And this is another one of those classic Daboisms of trying to deflect what's coming, which is probably a 8-4 lackluster based on expectation season. I actually wrote down some of my favorite Daboisms for this segment.
Go ahead.
BYOG, bring your own guts. He said that a few years ago. It's only unthinkable if you don't think it. That's Dabo. No shine without the grind. And then my favorite is greatness is never on sale. You got to pay full price. I
Look,
mean, come on, man.
hey, they're building a team after God's name, image, and likeness, which look,
That's a good one too. And now he's talking about graduation rates. And when college football coaches start touting their graduation rates, then it's like, man, I might not make the playoff in 2024.
this ain't UMass, man. Like
Right.
what are we
Exactly.
what are we doing here? I mean, which guys that's I think part of this that gets a little bit lost in the shuffle is, he did say that they were actually looking at guys and he didn't just straight up shun the transfer portal.
Sure.
I had heard that ETN was a legitimate target that Clemson was going after, so I assume that's one of the few guys. But based on what you've heard, who is Clemson even looking at as a potential option in the transfer portal? And did they have to have bloodlines to Clemson at some way? Like it seems like all of these guys do if they're getting any sort of interest.
Yeah, offensive line was definitely a position of need for Clemson. It's a new look offensive front there. Obviously, wide receiver. Man, the last couple of years, the Tigers haven't had dogs at that position. T. Higgins is probably the last great wide receiver they've had, and Cade Klubnik needs that because he's been a pretty inconsistent quarterback through the first year and a half or so of his tenure at Clemson. Also, offensive line, wide receiver, and then obviously, as you mentioned, running back. Losing Will Shipley a year early to the NFL draft is huge. They've got Maffa coming back, but he's never been a featured guy. Obviously, he can be that, but you would have liked to have, signed a guy like ETN, and instead Georgia does. But if I'm Dabo Swinney, man, I'm players want to play at top 10 programs, but right now I don't know if Clemson is in that range because they don't take portal guys. So, when I'm a 5-star wide receiver and I'm not getting burned at my current school, I'm not even thinking Clemson when I enter the portal because, one, they're not probably interested in me. And, two, there's no proven talent that has shown they can go to Clemson as a portal guy and play well. So I don't know Dabo's game plan right now, but he does have two national championships in the last, 6 or 7 years, which is two more than Lincoln Riley and Ryan Day and Brian Kelly combined. So
Yeah, look, it's fair, and you can spin it that way. I mean, if you're an optimist about Clemson, you could say, well, they're 32nd in Bill Connolly's updated percentage of returning production. That's
right.
good. You got your starting quarterback back. That's good. You've got an offensive coordinator who, if he gets to call his own plays, Garrett Riley, you feel good about that. But I'd be worried about a defense that's a year further removed from Brent Venables that just lost 5 guys to the NFL draft. Dabo fires his O-line coach. He fires his D-line coach. You're going to be very new look in those areas, as you mentioned, especially on the offensive line. I can't even get to justifying Clemson on the heels of 3 consecutive finishes outside the top 10. I can't justify Clemson being a 10-2 team that gets into the playoff. When you're doing these early projections, have you even got there yet?
Yeah, 10 wins is going to be tough for Clemson. Although the schedule outside of Florida State and Georgia is favorable, that means Clemson goes 10-0 against the other 10 games. And we haven't seen it the last couple of years. Dabo has lost some games like an at NC State maybe. That's going to be tough, but I don't know. I don't see Clemson right now as a 10-win team either. I don't have Clemson in the playoff. I actually think Virginia Tech might be a surprise team in the ACC. And Florida State and Miami are my two top teams right now in that league based on what they've done this offseason. Miami spent more money in the portal than any program in college football. So this is the time for Mario Cristobal.
Yeah, that over under is 9.5 wins in the regular season for Miami,
Crazy.
which
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty nuts. I was thinking about this. If Dabo were in the SEC, I'd love to know what the conversation would be about his buyout. I would love to know because he agreed to one of those 10-year extensions at the start of 2022, which is
Yeah.
that's when it was all the rage. But you look at that contract, which runs through 2031. It was 10 years, 115 million. I don't know when he's going to get a raise or a new deal off of that based on the way things are going. If he's fired at any point in the next two seasons, Brad, it's 60 million bucks. 60 million bucks. And then if he's fired in 2026, the buyout drops all the way down to, wait for it, $57 million still. And then if my math is correct, that it's still after 2027, it's still $49 million to fire him. This is an unfireable contract, even if this continues and if Clemson starts to miss out on the college football playoff, which is going to feel magnified in the 12-team era. Is this any sort of deal that Clemson can wiggle its way out of, or is this pretty much Dabo has signed his lifetime contract?
I think Dabo Swinney is going to leave Death Valley on his own accord. And that's probably the best for both parties. Now, if I'm Dabo Swinney, like you said, I mean, I've got a, generational check waiting on me if, I do get fired for on field results. But I think Dabo Swinney, and we saw it this time, with the Alabama opening, his name was kind of in that top 5 mix, along with a few others. That showed me that, maybe he is looking to jump. And I think right now, his time there is wearing out a bit. I mean, there's a contingent of Clemson fans on every social media platform who, if Dabo was fired tomorrow, they would be excited that they're getting a new coach. That's just the state of college football, man. If you haven't won a title in the last 5 years, you're nothing. So, I think Dabo Swinney is still a top 5 coach. I wouldn't put him in the top 3 right now, but he's a guy that if I was starting a program, I would certainly hire Dabo Swinney.
Over under 1.5 Clemson playoff appearances the next 4 years.
I'd go 2. I'd go 2 of the next 4. Because, well, and I'm going to say that because I think in 2026, we're going to see another expansion.
Oh, yeah, so true.
There's going to be even more spots. And as long as Clemson's in the ACC, I think Dabo is an average of a 9 to 10 win coach. Now, if they move to the Big Ten or SEC, I think the game changes considerably for Dabo.
Okay, let's talk SEC quarterback rankings. We both did them. If you were just looking at both of ours, you'd be like, did you guys just do this as a group project? Because
they're very similar.
Really similar, man. There are only 3 spots I saw where we had separation of at least two rankings, and there weren't any more than 2 spots apart. So our biggest disagreements, this is going to sound bad. Blake Shapen, I had at 14, you had at 12. Okay. Graham Mertz, I had it. Yeah. Graham Mertz, I had at 9, you had him at 7. And Connor Wigman, I had him at 6 while you had him at 8. I was hoping we were going to be able to kind of have a good hearty debate about any one of these guys, but I don't think we disagree on a whole lot. How about one of those 3 guys? Talk me into why you had them ranked where you did, maybe between Shapen, Mertz, and Wigman.
Yeah, so we can start at Mertz. I'm a little bit higher on Graham Mertz than I guess most national analysts. Part of that is because I had him 14th this time last year in the SEC, and he goes out and has 20 touchdown passes, 3 picks. That's kind of a trend with me, man. Once I rank a guy last in May, he has a decent year a few months later. But I was most impressed with Graham Mertz this spring that he was able to hold off DJ Lagway, for first team reps, and now he's going to be a second year starter at Florida. I do think we see Lagway play some this season, not necessarily because Graham Mertz is going to play bad, but if Florida's 2-5 in late October, Napier needs to show the fan base and boosters the future of the program before he's let go. So I think it's a very good quarterback room there in Gainesville. I don't know how it's going to work out with all you have is Eugene Wilson on the outside, and that's about it right now, and no featured back besides Montrell Johnson. But yes, Graham Mertz is 7th for me, and you mentioned Connor at Texas A&M. It's going to be very interesting to see how that offense evolves with Colin Klein. losing Evan Stewart to Oregon was huge. I think he's the top wideout transfer in this 2024 cycle, former 5-star. But if I'm Evan Stewart, I made the right decision because I wasn't getting the football enough, man. I wasn't getting enough targets. He had 4 touchdowns last year. He's a guy that should have 10 or 12 touchdowns, But yeah, Wakeman's a guy that the first few starts last year had like 9 touchdowns, 2 picks, and had a really good September. So he's a guy that can elevate Texas A&M if the defense is good, and both sides of the ball have been kind of rebuilt through the portal.
Yeah, I like Wingman a lot, and it's no secret to people listening to the show. I think that the limited sample size has been just so encouraging, despite all the moving pieces.
Yeah.
I love what he does against the blitz, against pressure. I just think that's the type of guy that you can build around and who can handle some crap, because that's kind of what he's had to go through so far. And obviously, it's a different regime in there, but I think a regime that could actually help him in some of the things that he does particularly well. Yeah, Mertz is going to be fascinating. Mertz is one of the most intriguing players in the SEC just because of the Lagway element, because of all that. And like, if he's decent though, does Billy actually say, yeah, I know we're 4-1 or something like that, but you know what? I got to show the people more Lagway. I don't know. Like, I think that's going to be such a tricky thing to have to manage. And it's hard to come up with a comp because of the circumstances surrounding Billy.
Sure. And if Florida beats Miami in, that 3:30 game opening weekend and Graham Mertz has 325 and 4 touchdowns, yeah, you're not going to see Lagway in September. Graham has that job, but that's very interesting, man. And a few of these coaches on the hot seat, Napier and Sam Pittman in the SEC, they need elite quarterback play to get to bowl season this year, because both those schedules in Fayetteville and Gainesville are among the most brutal in college football.
Blake Shapen, Jordan Ta'amu vibes. Any possibility of that?
I like the offense he's in. Does that count? I mean, that offense is going to produce by default, right?
I would think, but the receivers, man, the Justin Robinson transfer portal decision, you're kind of looking around going, man, I don't know that they got those dudes on the outside. They have a quarterback and maybe even an offensive line that's all right, that can hold up in certain situations, but that's probably why I'm a little bit lower on him, despite the fact that he's actually one of the more accomplished quarterbacks in the SEC coming back when you look at, career yards and stuff, the stuff that he did at Baylor. But yeah, I have him at 14. So maybe that's my good luck spot. You're 14 is kind of the curse for you. Who did you have at 14 this year? I should have asked that.
Let me see. 14, I think I had Taylon Green at Arkansas.
That's good then.
Because I had Lenora Sellers at 15, which, to be honest, my rankings after Jackson Arnold at 10, 11 through 16, man, is going to be interchangeable. And we see that every year. I mean, there's going to be guys based on the talent around them that either have a good year or not. And one of the reasons I put Lenora Sellers, Gamecocks quarterback, at 15 is we haven't seen him throw yet against, a formidable defense. The offensive line may have a freshman starter at one of the tackle spots, and then brand new backfield, and there's not a wide receiver 1 right now. So regardless of how good the coaching staff feels Lenora Sellers is, I mean, there's not a ton of weaponry around him. In SEC, you got to have that.
I agree. We had Sellers in the same spot, despite the fact that there is obviously some promise, and it's pretty telling the way that he's been given this opportunity in spring to make a bigger splash in the portal. I agree with you. I think the cutoff is 10. Like, I think there are 10 quarterbacks, as crazy as it sounds. I think there are 10 quarterbacks that have all SEC upside with Arnold at 10. And that's a wild sentence to say, but I was thinking about this too. Who do you think is the better path to an all SEC season? Milroe or Nico Iamaleava?
I think Iamaleava does. I think Nico is going to be one of the rising stars in college football this season, partly because Tennessee's wide receivers around him, I think, are better than what Milroe has at Alabama.
True.
I know that might be sacrilegious to say, but, I mean, Tennessee has 3 returning starters. Dante Thornton's a guy that didn't play all that much last year, but they're expecting big things out of him finally. They got a star tight end out of the portal. And then Milroe has a guy behind him in Ty Simpson, man, that I think the leash isn't going to be all that long on Jalen Milroe, despite him being a preseason Heisman candidate. I'm really not sure if he's the perfect fit in Kalen DeBoer's offense. And for Jalen Milroe to be, an all-SEC guy, DeBoer's going to have to run him a little bit more than he did Michael Penix and everybody else he's coached. at the quarterback spot. So Bama's still a team. I don't have them as a preseason playoff team in my early
Oh,
projections, but I do have 4 SEC teams in, and I think that fourth spot comes down to LSU, Bama, or Missouri.
okay. On the subject of Milrow, I agree with you that there's going to take some back and forth with
Yeah,
he and DeBoer in this offense. He's so different from Michael Penix and what he wants to be able to do. But at the same time, because we saw Milrow finish the year the way that he did those last 2 months and be the player that he was,
right.
it's kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of a knock on DeBoer if we see him struggle and if we do have those questions about that leash and if we are having conversations about Ty Simpson. I don't know, man. Like I've seen Milrow be a really good player. I saw him be the best player on the field in an SEC championship game to prevent Georgia from three-peating. Like there's some of that would have to come back to DeBoer if this doesn't really work out. And I would probably put more blame on the head coach even in that spot than Milrow, despite the fact that I think we see some of the flaws in his game so far.
I'm looking forward to seeing what kind of progress and development Jalen Milrow has made. Is he a top 15 pick in 2025? Is he a mid-round quarterback if he doesn't play well this season? It's going to be very interesting to me. And I mean, I think really that the straw that stirs the drink for the Alabama offense is going to be Justice Haynes and Miller and the running backs. We didn't see a ton of production at the running back spot last year. Milrow had to run for his life a lot. And, you talk about like sack rate and guys who, when they're pressured, bad things happen. Milrow and Shador Sanders were toward the bottom of college football last season when that happened. So he's still a guy that in the open field, man, he's going to make you miss. And, he's a guy that could have a Jaden Daniels type rushing season. But I mean, I don't see a 3,500 yard passer at a Milrow. And a lot of that maybe is not his fault. When Jeremy Bernard is going to be your wide receiver one, I mean, there's some issues there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm optimistic about Bernard too, but maybe it'll look different with Milrow. Like some of the stuff that he looks like in the first 2 seconds after getting the football, where he now
Right.
feels like he has an idea where the football is going to end up, and it's not at his ankles or something like that, even in a playoff game. So that means when we do these all SEC ballots in the preseason coming up here, with those top three spots, you won't have Milrow, the guy who finished higher in the Heisman voting than any returning player in college football. You won't have him as one of your preseason all SEC guys because you'll have Beck at that first spot. Then you'd have Ewers at second and then Dart at three. That's going to feel weird too, I would imagine.
It does, and that speaks to, I think those three guys on those elite teams ahead of Jalen Milrow are going to be better than Alabama, Georgia, Texas, and Ole Miss. And you look at what Jackson Dart. I mean, I put him at 3. I strongly considered putting him ahead of Quinn Ewers at number 2 based on what he has around him. Not only does he bring back Trey Harris and Jordan Watkins, but they stole South Carolina's top returning offensive player in Juice Wells. And then he has a tight end who might be an early round pick as well, multi-year starter. So Lane Kiffin has a wealth of riches offensively with Jackson Dart back, and like I said, those two guys ahead of him, I think are probably going to be the top 2 quarterbacks off the board next spring.
Okay, these leaked EA Sports covers. I got some thoughts on them. I'm kind of
I
sharing.
can't wait for this game, man. I'm amped for it. I played it religiously growing up.
Who's your first non-South Carolina dynasty team?
Well, I've joined Jake Crane's planned online dynasty, and I'm going to play as USF down there in Tampa, pretty close to you.
Let's go.
Byron Brown's going to have a 6,000 yard season for me at quarterback. It's going to be fun, but I'm looking forward, man, to just the new uniform options these last 10 years that we're going to see, and custom stadiums, and how much recruiting is going to change. I mean, look at NIL. I mean, just everything, man. The world has changed in college football the last decade, and I hope these game developers include some of that.
Brad, you're going to be the guy that's going to spend more time messing around with helmets and uniforms than you are
An
playing
actual
the game
gameplay,
itself.
of course. Cleats, all of it. Yeah.
What is it? Okay, maybe I'm just stirring the pot here for the sake of stirring the pot, but I thought it was interesting Shador Sanders wasn't on the cover. I think everybody kind of penciled him in, or at least in the leaked covers, I should say. The leaked covers, TBD on what that looks like. But seeing Travis Hunter there as a guy who's shown up on both of them and not having Shador, would there have been outrage in college football if Colorado from a 4-8 team had 2 guys on that cover?
Travis seems a little more likable than Shador. Some of the things Shador's done publicly recently has been kind of a head turner. But Travis, man, he's always all smiles. He's the two-way player. I think he's kind of the face of the franchise for Coach Prime, not his son. So I'm excited about playing with Colorado too. Seeing I would have utilized Dylan Edwards in a crazy amount of formations, and now he's off to the races at Kansas State. So I'm sort of looking forward to seeing where Colorado is even ranked in that game. Are they going to be high 80s? Are they going to put Dion 92 or something? So I'm looking forward to it.
I don't know how many guys are going to be able to block on that offensive line in the game.
Just Jordan Seaton, probably.
That's not great, not ideal, man. Brad, this has been great. You've got like a million things coming out on 24/7 Sports. What's the next content piece? What are you working on as we speak?
Yeah, I'm working on national position group rankings across college football in the power conferences. That'll be coming in June, and I'll be seeing you in a few weeks, man, at SEC Media Days in Texas for the first time. That'll be very interesting.
Gotta have some barbecue. I've actually never been in Texas for like longer than an airport stay, which is crazy. I don't know why. It's just one of those places that I haven't had any dealings with. So
let's do barbecue and then pickleball, indoor pickleball one night. That'd be fun.
Brad, you're all about the pickleball, man. I'm gonna get into it. I love table tennis. I'm a big ping pong
guy. You'll be a natural then, yeah.
I hope so, man. Yeah, we'll get it set up, man. Looking forward to it. We'll do this again real soon, man. Appreciate it.
Good to see you, man.